The child labor auction in Galveston was wrapping up when farmer Samuel McKinnon spotted her. A frail 14-year-old girl with eyes that held secrets darker than a Texas night. He paid $50 unaware that this broken child would become the key to saving his dying ranch, his barren marriage, and his own tortured soul. What happened next would shake the very foundations of the Old West. Before we get into the story, many of our returning viewers have mentioned concerns about script quality, so we've brought in a new writer. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Help us grow, and thanks for being here. Samuel McKinnon stood at the back of the crowded shed, his calloused hands clutching his hat as he watched the pitiful parade of children being sold like cattle. The year 1887 had been hard on Texas, and desperate families were making desperate choices. Some sold their children to factories, others to farms, all hoping their kids might find better lives than the poverty that had consumed their own. At 42, Samuel owned one of the largest cattle ranches in Brazos County, but prosperity felt empty when shared with no one. His wife Martha had been trying for children for 15 years, and each failed attempt had etched deeper lines into both their faces. The ranch hands whispered behind his back. What good was a man who couldn't even sire an heir? The auctioneer's voice cut through his thoughts. Now, we have a girl, 14 years old, healthy and strong, worked the cotton fields since she was 8, good with animals, can read and write a bit. Samuel looked up to see a thin girl being pushed onto the makeshift platform. Her brown hair hung in tangled strands around a face that might have been beautiful were it not for the hollowed cheeks and the dark circles under her eyes. Her dress was little more than rags, patched and repatched until the original fabric was barely visible. But it was her eyes that caught him. They weren't the vacant stare he'd seen in the other children. These eyes burned with a fierce intelligence, darting around the room as if calculating every exit, every face, every possibility. Bidding starts at $20, the auctioneer yelled. $25, hollered a man near the front. Samuel recognized him. Thomas Briggs, who owned a small farm north of town. Briggs was known for working his hands almost to death. $30, came another voice. Samuel found himself stepping forward before he'd made a conscious decision. $50. The shed fell silent. $50 was more than most of these children would make in 2 years of labor. The auctioneer's eyes lit up with greed. $50 from the gentleman in the back. Do I hear $60? The silence stretched. No one was foolish enough to bid against Samuel McKinnon when he'd set his mind on something. Sold to Mr. McKinnon for $50. As Samuel made his way to the front to complete the transaction, he met the girl's eyes. Instead of the gratitude or fear he expected, he saw something that made him pause. Pity. This child, who had just been sold like a head of cattle, was looking at him with pity. What did Rebecca see that Samuel didn't yet grasp? If you're wondering that too, drop a like so more people discover this story. Subscribe to the channel and let us know in the comments. Where are you watching from? Let's discover together what happens when these two worlds meet. The auctioneer handed him a slip of paper with the girl's details. Name's Rebecca Sullivan. Parents died of fever last winter. She's been living on the streets ever since. You got yourself a good worker, Mr. McKinnon. Samuel folded the paper and approached the girl. Up close, he could see she was even thinner than she'd appeared on the platform. Her wrists were like twigs, and her shoes had holes that showed her toes. Miss Sullivan, he said, touching the brim of his hat. I'm Samuel McKinnon. You'll be coming to work on my ranch. She studied his face for a long moment before speaking. Her voice was soft, but clear. What kind of work? General help around the house and grounds. My wife Martha will explain your duties. What if I don't want to come? The question surprised him. Most of the children he'd seen today had accepted their fate with resigned silence. You have a choice in the matter, but winter's coming, and the streets of Galveston aren't kind to youngsters on their own. Rebecca looked around the shed at the remaining children still waiting to be sold, at the hungry-eyed men counting their coins. When she looked back at Samuel, something in her expression had changed. I suppose I'll come with you then, Mr. McKinnon. The journey to the McKinnon ranch took the better part of the day. Samuel had brought his wagon, laden with supplies from town, and Rebecca sat beside him on the bench as they traveled the dusty roads through the East Texas countryside. She didn't say much during the ride, but Samuel caught her watching everything. The way he handled the horses, The landmarks they passed, the position of the sun. This wasn't a child simply going for a ride. She was memorizing every detail of the route. "Are you planning on running away?" he asked after they'd traveled for several hours. "Depends," she replied without looking at him. "On what? If you bought me for labor, or for other reasons." The quiet steel in her voice made Samuel's stomach clench. He pulled the wagon to a halt and turned to face her fully. "Miss Sullivan, I want to be clear about something. You're coming to my ranch to help with honest labor, cooking, cleaning, caring for the animals. Nothing more. Any man who would harm a child deserves to be strung up, and I include myself in that judgment." She studied his face again with those unnervingly mature eyes. Finally, she nodded. "All right then." They rode in more comfortable silence after that. As the sun began to set, they crested a hill, and Rebecca had her first glimpse of the McKinnon Ranch. It stretched across the valley below like a small town. The main house was built of sturdy timber with a wraparound porch and dormer windows. A large barn stood to one side with several smaller buildings scattered across the property. Cattle dotted the pastures that stretched as far as the eye could see. "It's bigger than I expected," Rebecca said softly. "Took me 20 years to build her," Samuel replied with quiet pride. "Of course it'll all belong to strangers when I'm gone, seeing as how Martha and I haven't been blessed with children." Something flickered across Rebecca's face at these words, but she said nothing. When they pulled up in front of the main house, a woman emerged onto the porch. Martha McKinnon was still beautiful at 38, with blonde hair only lightly touched with gray, and a figure that spoke of a good life. But there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested years of disappointment. "Samuel," she called as he climbed down from the wagon. "You're later than I expected." "Had some business in town," he replied, then turned to help Rebecca down. "Martha, this is Rebecca Sullivan. She'll be helping out around the house." Martha's eyes widened as she took in the girl's ragged appearance. "My goodness, child, you look like you haven't had a proper meal in months." "Probably haven't," Samuel said. "I was thinking she could have the small room next to the kitchen." "Nonsense," Martha said quickly. "She'll have the guest room upstairs. Come along, dear. Let's get you cleaned up and fed." As Martha led Rebecca into the house, Samuel watched from the porch. He'd expected his wife to be pleased with the help, but there was something almost desperate in the way she'd taken to the girl. Inside, Martha was already moving around the kitchen, heating water and getting food from the pantry. "Sit down, Rebecca. That's your name, isn't it? What a pretty name. I had a sister named Rebecca once." Rebecca perched on the edge of a chair, her eyes taking in the cozy kitchen with its polished wood surfaces and cheerful curtains. "It's very nice here, Mrs. McKinnon." "Oh, call me Martha, dear. We're not formal folk." Martha set a plate of bread and cold meat in front of her. "Now eat while I draw you a bath." As Rebecca ate slowly at first, then with growing hunger, Martha chattered about the house, the ranch, the nearby town. But Samuel, watching from the doorway, noticed how his wife's hands trembled slightly as she worked, and how her voice had a fragile quality he hadn't heard in years. When Rebecca finished eating, Martha led her upstairs to the guest room. It was furnished simply but clean and comfortable, with a window that overlooked the ranch grounds. "This will be your room," Martha said, smoothing the quilt on the bed. "I'll bring you some proper clothes tomorrow. I think I have some things that might fit." "Thank you," Rebecca said. "I'm not used to such kindness." Martha's face pinched for just a moment before she composed herself. "Every child deserves kindness, dear. Now let's get you that bath." The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Rebecca proved to be everything the auctioneer had promised, and more. She was up before dawn, helping Martha with breakfast for the ranch hands. She tended the vegetable garden with a skill that suggested years of experience. She could mend clothes, churn butter, and even help with the animals when needed. But it was her effect on Martha that Samuel found most remarkable. His wife, who had grown increasingly withdrawn over years of failed pregnancies, seemed to come alive again. She spent hours teaching Rebecca to cook special dishes, showing her how to arrange flowers from the garden, even reading to her in the evenings. "She's a bright girl," Martha said to Samuel one evening as they sat on the porch. "She learns everything so quickly." "Maybe too quickly," Samuel replied, watching Rebecca in the distance as she helped one of the ranch hands tend a lame horse. "Sometimes I get the feeling she's older than she looks. She's had to grow up fast, poor thing, but she's safe now." Samuel nodded, but something bothered him. Rebecca worked hard and didn't cause trouble, but there were times he caught her watching the horizon with a calculating expression, or noticed how she always seemed to know exactly where everyone was at any given moment. One October evening, he found her in the barn after supper, sitting in the hay and staring up at the darkening sky. He climbed up to join her. "A penny for your thoughts," he said. She looked at him, then back at the sky. "I was thinking about my parents. The auctioneer said they died of fever. They did, but before that they had dreams. Papa wanted to start his own farm someday. Mama wanted to learn to play the piano." She was quiet for a moment. "I wonder if I'll ever have dreams like that." "What kind of dreams would you have?" She considered the question seriously. "I think I'd like to learn to read better. Real books, not just the Bible and almanac. And maybe learn about numbers, not just counting, but the kind of arithmetic that helps you figure out important things." Samuel was intrigued. "What kind of important things? Like how many head of cattle a ranch can support, how to know if you're making or losing money, how to plan for bad years." She looked at him directly. "Like how to make sure you never have to sell your children?" The words hit him like a physical blow. In all his years running the ranch, he had never spoken to anyone, not even Martha, about the financial side of the operation. Yet this 14-year-old girl had somehow grasped that this knowledge was power. "I could teach you," he heard himself say, "if you were truly interested." Her eyes lit up. "You would?" "Reading, writing, arithmetic, the basics of running a ranch. But it would be in addition to your regular work, not in its place." "I understand." And so Rebecca's education began. After the evening chores were done, she would join Samuel in his study, where he taught her to read from his collection of books and showed her how to work with numbers. She absorbed everything with a hunger that impressed him. Martha was delighted with the arrangement. "It's wonderful to see her learning," she told Samuel. "Every girl should have an education." But as autumn turned to winter, Samuel began to notice changes in both his wife and Rebecca. Martha had always been particular about Rebecca's appearance, but now she seemed almost obsessive about it. She ordered new dresses from town, spent hours brushing and styling Rebecca's hair, and insisted on teaching her what she called proper etiquette. Rebecca submitted to all this attention with good grace, but Samuel sometimes caught her looking in the mirror with an expression that was hard to read. The first real test came in November, when an unseasonable storm brought 3 days of freezing rain and wind. The ranch hands worked around the clock to bring the cattle to shelter and secure the buildings, while Martha and Rebecca kept hot food and coffee flowing. On the second night, one of the newer ranch hands, a young man named Jake Winters, cornered Rebecca in the kitchen while Martha was upstairs and Samuel was in the barn. "You're growing up quite pretty," Jake said, moving closer than was proper. "I bet you get lonely sometimes, stuck out here with just old folks for company." Rebecca backed away, but Jake followed. "Come on, don't be shy. I could show you some fun." "I think you should go back to the bunkhouse," Rebecca said calmly. "Not till I get what I came for," Jake replied, reaching for her. He never saw the cast iron skillet coming. Rebecca's blow caught him squarely on the temple, dropping him to the kitchen floor like a sack of feed. He wasn't unconscious, but he was definitely seeing stars. "I said, go back to the bunkhouse," Rebecca repeated, still holding the skillet. Jake struggled to get up, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. "You little wildcat. You could have killed me." "Could have, didn't. I won't be so careful next time." Samuel's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "What in tarnation is going on here?" He stood in the kitchen doorway, taking in the scene. Jake clutching his bleeding head, Rebecca with the skillet, the grim set of her eyes. Jake started to stammer. "Mr. McKinnon, this girl attacked me. I know exactly what you were doing," Samuel said coldly. "Pack your bags. You're off this ranch tonight." "But Mr. McKinnon, it's storming out there. Should have thought about that before you decided to bother a child under my protection." Samuel's hand rested on the gun at his hip. "You got 10 minutes to clear out, or I'll drag you out myself." Jake looked from Samuel to Rebecca, saw no mercy in either face, and stumbled towards the door. "This ain't over," he muttered. "Yes, it is," Samuel replied. After Jake had gone, Samuel turned to Rebecca. "Are you all right?" She nodded, setting the skillet aside. "I'm sorry for the trouble. You have nothing to apologize for." You defended yourself, and you showed more restraint than I would have." He studied her face. "Where'd you learn to take care of yourself like that?" "Living on the streets teaches you things," she said simply. Martha appeared in the doorway, drawn by the commotion. When she heard what had happened, her face went pale with fury. "That animal," she said. "Thank goodness you're safe, Rebecca." But Samuel noticed how Martha's hands trembled as she fussed over the girl, and how her eyes kept darting to the windows as if expecting more threats to appear. That night, after Rebecca had gone to bed, Martha came to Samuel's study where he was working on the ranch ledgers. "We need to talk," she said. Samuel looked up from his books. "About what happened tonight?" "About Rebecca." Martha sat down heavily in the chair across from his desk. "Samuel, we can't keep pretending she's just a hired girl." "What do you mean?" "Look at her, really look at her. She's becoming a beautiful young woman, and we're two childless people who've grown very attached." Martha's voice broke slightly. "What happens when she decides to leave? What happens when some young man comes calling for her?" Samuel put his pen down. He'd been trying not to think about those very questions. "She's only been here a few months, Martha. And in those few months she's become the daughter we never had. Don't tell me you don't see it too." Samuel was quiet for a long moment. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we make it official. We could adopt her. Martha, she's not an orphan. She was sold for labor." "By who?" "By the county. She has no family left and she's clearly happy here." Martha leaned forward. "Samuel, this could be our chance. The chance we've prayed for all these years." Samuel understood his wife's desperation, but something about the idea bothered him. "We should ask Rebecca what she wants." "Of course, but think about it. She'd have a real home, a real family. She'd inherit the ranch someday. Isn't that better than any uncertain future that otherwise awaits her?" That night, Samuel lay awake thinking about Martha's words. He had grown fond of Rebecca. There was no denying that. She was bright, capable, and showed more understanding of the ranch's operations than any of his hired hands. But was Martha's plan fair to the girl? Revelations. The answer came sooner than expected. 2 days later, as Rebecca was helping Samuel with the ranch books, she suddenly looked up from the ledger she was studying. "Mr. McKinnon, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Mrs. McKinnon wants to adopt me, doesn't she?" Samuel's pen froze over the page. "What makes you say that?" "Little things. The way she talks about the future, the clothes she's been buying for me, how she introduces me to people in town." Rebecca closed the book carefully. "She's a kind woman, and I'm grateful for everything you both have done. But I need you to know something." "What is it?" Rebecca was quiet for a moment, as if choosing her words carefully. "I hadn't been entirely truthful about my circumstances when you bought me." Samuel put his pen down. "Go on." "My parents really did die of fever. That part was true, but I wasn't just living rough on the streets after that." She met his eyes. "I was working for a man named Garrett Mills. He ran certain kinds of business in Galveston." Samuel's blood ran cold. He'd heard of Mills, a man who controlled most of the illegal activities in the port city. "What kind of work?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Nothing like what you're thinking," Rebecca said quickly. "I was too young for that, but I kept his books, carried messages, kept an eye out for trouble. I was good with numbers, and I could move through town without attracting attention." "Why are you holding this back from me?" "Because Mrs. McKinnon deserves to know what kind of person she wants to adopt, and because—" Rebecca hesitated. "Because I think someone's been watching the ranch." Samuel's hand instinctively went to his gun. "What do you mean?" "Yesterday, when I was working in the garden, I saw sunlight glinting off something on the hills to the east, like someone was using field glasses. And 2 days ago, I found horse tracks near the creek that don't match any of your horses." "You think Mills sent someone after you?" "Maybe. Or maybe it's someone entirely different. But I learned a long time ago to pay attention when things don't feel right." Samuel stood up and walked to the window, scanning the hills Rebecca had mentioned. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I hoped I was wrong, and because I was afraid you'd send me away if you knew the truth about my past." Samuel turned back to her. "Rebecca, what you did to survive doesn't define who you are. But this Mills fellow, is it likely he'll come after you?" "I don't know. I never stole from him, never betrayed him, but he doesn't like loose ends." That afternoon, Samuel called his foreman, Tom Bradley, into his study. Tom had been with the ranch for 10 years and was one of the few men Samuel trusted completely. "I need you to organize a watch schedule," Samuel said. "Someone's been spying on the ranch." Tom's weather-beaten face grew serious. "You think we're going to have trouble?" "I think we need to be prepared for it." When Tom left to organize the men, Samuel found Martha in the kitchen making supper. He told her about his conversation with Rebecca, carefully watching his wife's face as he spoke. Martha listened in silence, her hands never stopping in their work. When he finished, she put her wooden spoon down and turned to face him. "Does this change how you feel about her?" she asked. "No, if anything, it makes me respect her more. She survived things that would have broken most adults." "Then it doesn't change how I feel either." Martha's voice was firm. "That child has been through enough. If trouble's coming, we'll face it together." Samuel felt a wave of love for his wife. Despite her desperate longing for a child, Martha's first concern was Rebecca's well-being. "There's one more thing," he said. "I don't think we should push the adoption idea right now. Rebecca needs to know she has choices, not feel like she's being passed from one owner to another." Martha's face fell a little, but she nodded. "You're right. But Samuel, I need you to know that that girl has brought something back to life in me that I thought was dead forever. I know, she's done the same for me." The attack came 3 nights later, just before dawn. Rebecca, who had taken to sleeping lightly, heard the horses before anyone else. She slid out of her bed and peered out the window to see 6 men riding hard towards the ranch house. She ran to Samuel in Martha's bedroom, pounding on the door. "Mr. McKinnon, riders coming fast." Samuel was out of bed instantly, grabbing his rifle from beside the bed. "How many?" "6 that I could see." Martha was already pulling on her wrapper. "Is it Mills?" "Don't know, but we need to get ready." Samuel sent Martha to wake the ranch hands while he and Rebecca took up positions at the front windows. In the gray pre-dawn light, they could see the riders fanning out to surround the house. "Rebecca," Samuel said calmly, "there's a shotgun in the kitchen pantry. Do you know how to use one?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Watch the back door." As Rebecca moved to the kitchen, she caught sight of the lead rider's face in the growing light. Her stomach clenched with recognition. It was Jake Winters, the ranch hand Samuel had fired, and behind him rode several men she recognized from her time in Galveston. The attack began with a shout from Jake. "McKinnon, send out the girl and nobody gets hurt." Samuel's voice boomed from the front window. "You're trespassing on my land. Clear out while you still can. This ain't about you, old man. It's about the girl. She stole something that belongs to my employer." Rebecca felt a shiver of fear. She had taken something from Mills before leaving Galveston, a small ledger that contained records of his payments to various city officials. She'd thought of it as insurance, something to keep her safe if Mills ever came after her. But apparently he wanted it back desperately enough to send men across half of Texas. The first shots came from the east side of the house where 2 of Mills's men were trying to force entry into the barn. Tom Bradley and another ranch hand returned fire from the barn loft, and the attackers fell back. Rebecca heard glass shatter in the parlor and knew someone was trying to come in through a window. She left her position at the back door and crept towards the sound. Shotgun ready. She found one of Mills's men halfway through the parlor window, struggling to get his legs in. Rebecca didn't hesitate. She fired once and the man tumbled back out with a scream. "Rebecca!" Martha's voice came from upstairs. "Are you all right?" "Fine," Rebecca yelled back, reloading the shotgun. The battle continued for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. Samuel and his men had the advantage of defensive positions, but Mills's men were well armed and determined. Finally, Jake's voice cut through the gunfire. "McKinnon, I'm coming in under a flag of truce. I want to talk." Samuel considered for a moment, then yelled back, "Come on, but keep your hands where I can see them." Jake approached the front porch with his hands raised, though Rebecca noted he was careful to stay behind cover. "McKinnon, this is simple. Send out the girl and we'll ride out. What makes you think I'd hand over a child to scum like you? Because if you don't, we'll burn you out. We got the numbers and the firepower." Samuel was about to reply when Rebecca stepped onto the porch, her shotgun cradled in her arms. "Jake." The young man's face twisted with anger and desire. "There you are, little girl. You caused me a lot of trouble. You caused your own trouble." Rebecca's voice was steady. "What does Mills really want?" You know what he wants. That little book you took when you ran off. Samuel looked at Rebecca with surprise, but she kept her eyes on Jake. And if I give it to him, then you're free to go? Mills doesn't want you. He's got plenty of girls. He just wants his property back. Rebecca was quiet for a long moment, thinking. The ledger was hidden in her room, stitched into the lining of her old dress, the one she'd been wearing when Samuel bought her. She had kept it as insurance, but now it seemed it might be the key to everyone's safety. All right, she said finally, but I want something in return. Jake sneered. You're not in a position to bargain, girl. Am I not? Rebecca gestured around the ranch. You're outnumbered and surrounded. Mr. McKinnon's men are good shots and they know this land better than you. You might take us down, but it'll cost you dearly. Samuel stepped up beside her. The girl's right. You want to start a war over a book? Jake's confidence wavered slightly. What do you want? A guarantee, Rebecca said. I give you the book. You and your men ride out and never come back. And you tell Mills I'm dead, killed in the attack. That way he has no reason to send anyone else after me. And what makes you think Mills will believe that? Rebecca smiled grimly. Because you're going to take him a piece of my dress with blood on it as proof. The negotiation took another 10 minutes, but eventually Jake agreed. Rebecca went upstairs and retrieved the ledger from its hiding place, then cut a strip of fabric from her old dress and stained it with blood from a cut on her hand. As Jake and his men prepared to leave, he looked back at Rebecca with a mix of anger and regret. You could have had an easy life in town, girl. Why'd you choose this? Rebecca looked around the ranch at Samuel standing protectively beside her, at Martha watching from the window, at the ranch hands who had risked their lives to defend her. Because this is home. Before we get further into the story, let us know how the story is now. How's the flow? How's the writing? Share your thoughts in the comments and help us grow. Thanks for being here. In the weeks that followed the attack, life on the ranch settled into a new rhythm. Samuel hired additional security and had Tom Bradley teach advanced marksmanship to every member of the household, including Martha and Rebecca. But more importantly, the crisis had clarified something for all of them. One December evening, as they sat around the fireplace after supper, Martha brought up the subject that had been on all their minds. Rebecca, dear, we need to discuss your future. Rebecca looked up from the book she was reading, one of Samuel's treatises on cattle rearing. What about it? Well, you're not a child anymore, and you're certainly not a hired hand. Martha exchanged a look with Samuel. We were wondering how you'd feel about becoming a true member of this family. You mean adoption? If that's what you want, Samuel said. But we want you to understand what it would mean. You'd inherit the ranch someday. You'd have a say in how it's run, but you'd also have responsibilities to the land, to the people who work on it, to the community. Rebecca closed her book and considered their words. Over the past few months, she had learned more about running a ranch than she'd ever expected. Samuel had taught her to read market reports, calculate feed costs, and plan for seasonal changes. She had discovered she had a knack for managing both cattle and people. Can I ask you something? She said finally. Of course. Why did you really buy me that day in Galveston? Samuel was quiet for a moment. Honestly, I saw something in your eyes that reminded me of myself at that age. A determination to survive no matter what. I respected that. And I saw a child who deserved better than life had given her, Martha added. I wanted to help. Rebecca nodded slowly. Then yes, I would like to be adopted. But I want to earn my place here, not just be given it. What do you mean? Samuel asked. I want to learn everything about running this ranch. I want to prove I can make it profitable and keep it growing. And I want to help other children like I was. Children who need a chance. Martha's eyes welled with tears. Oh, my dear girl. There's one more thing, Rebecca continued. I've been thinking about what happened with Mills's men. There are probably other children stuck in situations like I was. Maybe we could do something about that. Samuel leaned forward, intrigued. What do you have in mind? What if we started small? Maybe taking in 1 or 2 children a year who need homes. We could teach them useful skills, give them an education, help them build better lives. That's a wonderful idea, Martha said immediately. We have plenty of room and goodness knows we could use more help. Samuel was more cautious. It would be expensive, and we'd need to be careful about who we took in. I could help with that, Rebecca said. "I know how to spot children worth saving and how to avoid those who might cause trouble." They talked late into the night, planning and dreaming. When they went to bed, they had sketched out a vision that would make the McKinnon Ranch not just a cattle operation, but a place of refuge and opportunity. 5 years later, in the spring of 1892, Rebecca McKinnon stood on the front porch of the ranch house, watching a wagon approach from town. She was 19 now, a striking young woman with the confidence that comes from knowing her place in the world. The wagon was driven by Tom Bradley, and beside him sat a thin boy of about 12 with wary eyes and clothes that had seen better days. In the back of the wagon were 2 other children, an 8-year-old girl and another boy who couldn't have been more than 10. "More orphans from town?" Samuel asked, joining Rebecca on the porch. "The Children's Aid Society sent word they were coming," Rebecca replied. "The boy's name is Marcus. His parents died in a factory fire. The girl is Anna. Her mother abandoned her at a church, and the little one is Billy. He'd been living on the streets." Samuel nodded. Over the past 5 years, they had taken in 15 children. Some had stayed and become part of the ranch family. Others had moved on to establish their own lives, but all had left with skills and an education that gave them real opportunities. The ranch had prospered as well. Rebecca's insights into cattle management and her careful attention to finances had increased their profits by 30%. She had also established relationships with buyers in Kansas City and Chicago that gave them better prices for their beef. Martha appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. At 43, she looked younger than she had 5 years ago, despite the gray in her hair. Having children to care for, even temporarily, had given her a purpose that years of failed pregnancies had never provided. "Are they hungry?" she asked, which was always her first question about new arrivals. "Most likely," Rebecca replied. "Tom said they've been traveling for 3 days." When the wagon pulled up, Rebecca stepped down to greet the new arrivals. The boy Marcus looked at her with the same calculating expression she remembered having at his age. "Are you Rebecca McKinnon?" he asked. "I am. And you're Marcus Thompson?" "Maybe. Depends on what you want from me." Rebecca smiled. "Right now, I want you to come inside and get something to eat. After that, we'll talk about what happens next. What if I don't want to stay? Then you don't stay. But before you decide, let me show you something." She led him to the barn where several of the older children who had become permanent residents were working with the horses. One of them, an 18-year-old named David, looked up from the horse he was shoeing. "New arrivals?" he asked. "Marcus, Anna, and Billy," Rebecca replied. "David, why don't you tell Marcus about your first week here?" David grinned. "I spent most of it plotting ways to run off. Thought these folks were just another kind of trap." "What changed your mind?" Marcus asked. "They kept their word about everything. Said I could leave anytime, and they truly meant it. Said they'd teach me useful skills, and they did. Said they'd treat me fair, and they have." David went back to his work on the horse's hoof. "I've been here 4 years. Next month, I'm starting my own blacksmithing business in town." Marcus looked around the barn, noting the well-maintained equipment and the healthy animals. "And they don't make you do anything improper?" "Never," David said firmly. "Mr. and Mrs. McKinnon are good people. Rebecca, too. They saved my life." That night, after the new children had been fed and settled into the bunkhouse where the temporary residents lived, Rebecca sat in Samuel's study working on the ranch ledgers. He looked up from his correspondence. "You realize what we've built here, don't you?" he said. "A cattle ranch? More than that. We've created something that will last longer than all of us. These children we help, they'll go on to help others. The skills they've learned, the values they've absorbed, they'll pass that on." Rebecca put her pen down. "Do you ever regret buying me that day in Galveston?" Samuel considered the question seriously. "Not for a moment. Best $50 I ever spent. But I have to ask you the same question. Do you ever regret coming with me?" "Never." Rebecca's voice was firm. "You and Martha gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. The chance to be part of a real family. And now you're giving that same chance to others." Rebecca nodded, then looked out the window at the bunkhouse where the new children were settling in for their first night. "Samuel, there's something I've been thinking about." "What is it?" "I'm 19 now, old enough to marry if I wanted to. But I keep thinking about all the children out there who need help and all the work we still have to do here." She paused. "What if this is my calling? What if instead of having children of my own, I'm meant to help those who have no one else? Samuel studied her face carefully. That's a big decision, Rebecca. Are you sure you're not just afraid of leaving what's familiar? Maybe a little, she admitted. But mostly I feel like this is where I belong. This ranch, this work, this family we've built, it feels right. Then that's good enough for me, Samuel said. But remember, you're still young. You might change your mind someday. And if I do, I know you and Martha will support whatever decision I make. Always. The real test of everything they had built came in the summer of 1893, when a severe drought hit Texas. Cattle were dying all over the state, and many ranchers were facing bankruptcy. Samuel called a meeting of all the ranch residents, permanent and temporary, to discuss their situation. I won't lie to you, he said, addressing the group gathered in the main barn. This is the worst drought I've seen in 20 years. We're going to have to make some difficult choices. Marcus, who had been on the ranch for a year and had become one of its most dedicated residents, raised his hand. What kind of choices? Rebecca answered. We may have to sell some of the cattle early before they lose too much weight, and we'll need to find new water sources for the ones we keep. What about us? Asked Sarah, a 15-year-old girl who had arrived 6 months earlier. Will you have to send us away? Martha, who had been quiet until then, spoke firmly. Absolutely not. This family sticks together no matter what. David stepped forward. Mrs. McKinnon, Rebecca, Mr. McKinnon, you've all done so much for us. Now it's our turn to help. We can work longer hours, take on extra responsibilities, whatever you need. Murmurs of agreement came from all over the group. Even the newest arrivals nodded their willingness to help. Over the next few months, the ranch family rallied together in ways that impressed even Samuel. The older children took on adult responsibilities without complaint. Marcus revealed a knack for finding water sources and helped dig 2 new wells. Sarah organized the younger children into efficient work crews. Anna, despite being only 9, proved to have a gift for nursing sick animals. But it was Rebecca who truly emerged as a leader. She negotiated deals with cattle buyers, managed the ranch's dwindling finances with careful precision, and somehow kept everyone's spirits high even when things looked their bleakest. One August evening, as they sat on the porch after another blistering hot day, Martha took Rebecca's hand. I need to tell you something, she said. When Samuel first brought you home, I thought I wanted a daughter. But what I got was so much more than that. What do you mean? I got a partner. Someone who could carry on what we've built here long after Samuel and I are gone. Martha's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You've become the heart of this place, Rebecca. These children look up to you not because they have to, but because they want to. Rebecca squeezed her adopted mother's hand. I learned from the best. Samuel, who had been listening quietly, cleared his throat. There's something Martha and I have been discussing, and we think it's time to make it official. What is it? We want to make you a full partner in the ranch. Equal shares in everything. The land, the cattle, the profits, the decisions. Rebecca's eyes widened. Samuel, I don't know what to say. Say yes, Martha insisted. You deserve it 10 times over. But what about when you have children of your own someday? Samuel and Martha exchanged a look. Rebecca, Martha said gently, you are our daughter and all these other children we've helped raise. They are our legacy too. This ranch isn't just about blood family anymore. It's about chosen family. Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I accept. 10 years later in 1903, the McKinnon Ranch had become legendary throughout Texas. What had started as one childless couple's desperate attempt to find purpose had grown into something much larger. Rebecca, now 29, stood before a crowd of dignitaries from Austin who had come to see what the newspapers were calling the McKinnon miracle. Over the past 15 years, the ranch had taken in over 60 children. Most had gone on to successful lives as teachers, business owners, skilled tradesmen, and even a few who had started their own ranches using the knowledge they'd gained. Ladies and gentlemen, Rebecca addressed the crowd, what you see here is not the result of one person's vision. It's what happens when you give children what they need most. Not just food and shelter, but education, opportunity, and the knowledge that someone believes in them. Governor Joseph Sayers himself was in attendance, along with representatives from the Children's Aid Society, and several wealthy philanthropists who were interested in funding similar operations. "Miss McKinnon," the governor said. "Or should I say, Mrs. McKinnon?" He gestured to the wedding ring Rebecca now wore. "It's Mrs. Harrison now, actually," Rebecca replied with a smile. She had married James, Tom Bradley's younger brother, the year before, though she had maintained her role in running the ranch. "But the work continues regardless of my name." The governor nodded. "Tell us about your success rate. We understand that over 90% of the children who have lived here have gone on to productive, law-abiding lives." "That's correct. But I think the real measure of success is different." Rebecca gestured to the crowd around her, many of whom were former ranch residents who had returned for this special day. "The true success is that these young people learned they had value, that they could make choices about their lives, and that they had the power to help others in turn." Marcus Thompson, now 22 and owner of a successful freight business, stepped forward. "Governor, I was 12 when I came here. Angry, suspicious, sure every adult was trying to pull one over on me somehow. Mrs. Harrison, Rebecca, she didn't try to change me overnight. She just showed me there was another way to live." Sarah Martinez, who had become a school teacher, added, "They taught us that our past didn't have to define our future. But more than that, they showed us how to give back." The governor was clearly impressed. And could this model be replicated elsewhere? Samuel, now 58 but still vigorous, replied, "We believe so, but it requires more than just money. It requires people who are committed to seeing each child as an individual, not just another mouth to feed. The key," Martha added, "is treating them as family members, not charity cases." As the day's festivities continued, Rebecca found herself standing away from the crowd, looking out at the ranch that had become her life's work. James came to her side, sliding his arm around her waist. "Proud of what you built?" he asked. "Proud of what we all built together," she corrected. "Sometimes I think about what would have happened if Samuel hadn't been at that auction in Galveston. But he was. And you were brave enough to trust him." Rebecca nodded, then looked at the group of current residents who were helping to serve refreshments to the visitors. Among them were two new arrivals, siblings who had been orphaned when their parents died in a mining accident. "Do you think we're making a real difference?" she asked her husband. "Look around," James replied. 63 children who have better lives because of this place, some of them now helping other children in turn. If that's not making a difference, I don't know what is. That night, after all the visitors had left, the ranch family gathered for their traditional Sunday supper. The big dining room was full of current residents, some who had stayed on as permanent family members, and several who had returned for the celebration. Samuel stood to address the group, as he had done countless times over the years. But this time, his words carried special weight. 18 years ago, he began, I bought a 14-year-old girl at a labor auction because something in her eyes told me she deserved better. I thought I was saving her, but as it turns out, she was saving me and Martha and all of us. He looked around the table at the faces gathered there, young and old, newcomers and veterans, all part of the family they had chosen to create. What Rebecca built here proves something important. That family isn't just about blood. It's about commitment, about choosing to care for each other, about passing on the best of what we've learned. Rebecca stood up as well, and it proves that no child is too broken, too angry, or too lost to be saved. Sometimes all it takes is someone willing to see their potential instead of their problems. Marcus raised his glass. To the McKinnon Ranch, to chosen family, and to second chances. To second chances, the group chorused. 25 years after that first meeting in Galveston, Rebecca sat in the same study where Samuel had first taught her to read financial reports. Now it was she who was teaching, this time to Elena, a sharp-eyed 13-year-old girl who had arrived 6 months earlier. So if we sell the cattle in Kansas City instead of Fort Worth, how much more per head do we make? Rebecca asked. Elena studied the numbers carefully. About $350, but we have to factor in the extra shipping costs. Exactly. And what does that tell us about timing? That we need to watch the market reports and ship when the price difference is big enough to cover the extra costs and still turn a profit. Rebecca smiled. You're learning fast. Mrs. Harrison, Elena said, looking up from the ledger. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you do all this? Take in kids like me. I mean, you could have an easier life without us. Rebecca considered the question, the same one she had asked Samuel all those years ago. Because someone gave me a chance when I needed it most. And because I learned that the best way to honor that gift is to pass it on. Elena nodded thoughtfully. Do you think I could learn to run a place like this someday? I think you could learn to do anything you set your mind to. But first, let's master these cattle calculations. As they returned to work, Rebecca felt the same sense of continuity and purpose that had sustained her for over 2 decades. Outside, she could hear the voices of the children playing in the yard, the sound of the ranch hands working with the horses, and Martha calling everyone in for supper. Samuel and Martha were both in their 70s now, still active, but starting to slow down. Soon, the full responsibility for the ranch and its mission would fall to Rebecca and James. But she wasn't worried. They had built something strong enough to last, something that would continue to offer hope and opportunity to children who needed both. The girl who had been sold at a labor auction in Galveston had become the woman who ensured no child under her care would ever face such a fate. It was, she reflected, a pretty good life's work. As the sun set over the Texas hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Rebecca closed the ledger and prepared to join her family for supper. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new children to help, new opportunities to make a difference. But tonight there was just the warmth of home, the comfort of family, and the satisfaction of knowing that chosen love, freely given, could truly change everything. Rebecca's story shows us that chosen love can truly change everything. A girl who was sold like cattle became the salvation of a family and the refuge of dozens of other children. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear about second chances. Drop a like if you believe in the power of chosen family, and subscribe to the channel for more stories that prove our origin doesn't define our destiny. In the comments, we want to know, what part of Rebecca's journey impacted you the most? And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. You're part of this community that believes in the transformative power of hope. Until the next story.